Marshall Shannon with Ministry Design Concepts. Today we have as our guest Rick Wells. Rick, this is his fourth session that he has graciously agreed to do on ministering to step families, to blended families in our churches. And Rick certainly has the background to help him. And he said that he realized some time ago that the issues that he was encountering in counseling, which were usually at a crisis stage, may have been resolved if he had gotten to them earlier and done some intervention. And so he has served as a college instructor at Spartanburg Community College and Furman University here in Greenville. He's taught couple communications, core communications, and Rick is a certified facilitator for the Prepare, Enrich, and the DISC model of human behavior assessments. He has served as a pastor of care. He is a board-certified pastoral counselor and has an advanced certified human behavior consultant and certified leadership training specialist. And so as Rick steps in to teach and to train, he is both well experienced and certainly an expert, and he'll tell you he's still learning as he goes, as most of us are that are ministering to and with people. But we're so thankful that he is here today, and so I trust you'll get your pen and paper ready. And, of course, you can pause this video at any time and scroll down and submit a comment or a question. Just be sure not to hit submit until you've finished watching the video, because the software will start the video from the beginning when you do that. And so, Rick, thank you so much. Take it away and teach us.
Thank you, Marshall. And again, I appreciate what you said about being a student all the time. Today is actually a good segue into our final session, as we've spoken the last couple of weeks as to how to better prepare families, how to better prepare couples who are going into this arena of step families. Today, I want to speak a little bit about how do we bring a ministry into our church, and how do we serve these families that now we've gotten prepared. So as pastors and ministry leaders, we've talked about the preparation, the skill sets that are necessary as a pastor or ministry leader to go into these families. But now, how are we going to support them after they've gotten married and said I do and brought them into the church? And as such, we're all hopefully going to remain students and learn different skill sets and even have changes of opinions about it, because step families are one of the most underserved ministries in the churches today. And once again, I'm going to be using a lot of my discussion time based on the research of smart step families. So let's talk about that first. Let's talk about what are some of the barriers to step family ministries we're seeing in churches today. Well, the first is that church leaders don't perceive the need. Now, again, I'm not saying pastors. I'm saying church leaders. And we know we can't address the step family's concerns until we realize and acknowledge they exist. Now, in a second, we're going to see that this is just a paradigm, that we've had challenges within the church itself to accept the fact that we are going to be dealing with divorce, we are going to be dealing with separation, and we're going to be dealing with step families. And like I said, we'll talk about that more in a second. But we want to kind of be the leaders in this arena now and understand that there is a need. If we look at the statistics and go back in the earlier sessions, we're not talking a small percentage anymore. It is still smaller than families of origin, but we're still talking up in the 47 to 50% range. And, you know, why do they remain invisible to many church leaders? Well, the research has shown two reasons. One, there is a lower percentage of step families in the church. Now, I want to say, and take this a little bit further, the same issues that fall, I think, on the side of the church leaders also could be transferred over to step families. And where I'm going with this is sometimes step families have challenges in accepting that they will be accepted in a church because they have experienced divorce or they have experienced other challenges in their marriages in the past. And so the percentage is not, again, driven by the statistics of step families in general. There's many factors that involve step families not coming to the church. So I would strongly suggest that if you are a church looking to have an impact on the community in a positive outreach ministry, ministering to step families is one ministry that's going to do it, because I sit in my sessions and I sit with my couples that are being challenged from all the pressures they're having inside the marriage because of being a step family, and very few are able to honestly look me in the eyes and say that they can get the support, or there's something or some program going on at church which is helping them. In fact, unfortunately, it's usually the opposite way. Is sometimes they feel kind of like an outsider in their own church because of the step-family relationship. And, of course, spiritual marginalization. And all we mean by that is sometimes we do have or can present a different spiritual view of step families versus families of origin. A couple of other barriers we want to look at is developing a step family ministry is something churches don't want to perceive the need of. Once again, we're going back to this idea that do we really want to acknowledge that we have couples in our church that are either divorced or getting divorced? And I know any of us that work in the field of counseling, we don't want to have that idea of failure. And I think a lot of times we as pastors, when we work with couples in the original marriage and they still get divorced, we sometimes have the challenge of accepting that, or maybe think that we have failed. And unfortunately, we're not going to save all the marriages out there. I wish I could say there is a golden rule that will do it, but we're not. So we know that ministry is a tough and stressful position, and I know no one's going to argue that point with me. And pastors and ministers are coping with the ever-changing technology, rising baby boomer leadership styles, our musical styles. Marshall and I were just having a discussion before this got started, and I teach religion at one of the colleges up in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and just the difference in the style of music, and many of us, and maybe in your own church, you've had to create 2 or 3 different services in order to accommodate the different cultural styles that people are looking for, and those are usually driven by the musical styles. We're going to have the contemporary services, we're going to have the traditional services, and what we mean by that. But anyway, where I was going with this is the churches are becoming more polarized, while some members are holding out for status quo and pushing for radical, and others are pushing for radical change in the ministry methodology. And so once again, there probably be a little bit of a pressure on some pastors even today about the idea of thinking that if you brought in a step family ministry or a blended family ministry, that's not an honoring ministry, or it's not honoring God by acknowledging. But God already knows, we all know that. God already knows that divorce is going to happen. So are we going to be looking forward, and what I mean by that, are we going to be looking at a ministry as this is an opportunity to truly be an outreach ministry to a population demographic that is in dire need of this ministry? Also, the list of challenges, once again, I don't have to emphasize that anymore, is endless. So in order to understand step families, church leaders are being asked to rethink their most commonly held notions of marriage and family. And those that have participated or have gone over the previous PowerPoints and presentations, you are the ones that are stepping forward and saying, I have to keep my skill set strong. I have to understand what it is to work with my blended families, my step families, what it is to do premarital counseling with couples who are coming into a blended family versus family of origin. And yeah, even in my own practice, many times my notions of marriage and family have been challenged, but the reality is we are going to be working with step families, the kids, the parents. So sometimes we have to step back from our worldview of the standard family, and once again, those that are participating in this program now, you already have some of the skill sets that are necessary on how to retool and look afresh at the ministry audience that we're talking about here. And I have a lot of admiration for those that are wanting to learn how to minister to the step families, because it is completely different when they walk in that door. And finally, the third barrier is just the theological struggles we have with marriage and divorce, and that's what I was talking about. Divorce, we have to understand that divorce is not the unforgivable sin, and once remarried, no matter what their background, every couple should work to honor their vows. So we really are in a very powerful position. When we talk about powerful, we're in a position that we can make a positive impact. When couples fail at a marriage, they carry that failure with them for their life, and especially those that are believers and in the church and are always questioning. Once again, I'm sure you see as I see it, even after the divorce, there will be questions as to, is this really biblical? What could I have done differently? I tried everything I could, but he or she just wouldn't go along with me. And once we come to the idea that now we have the ability to honor this new family and keep this new family together. So step family ministry is not about condoning the past, but for lowering God's standard on marriage. In fact, just the opposite. It's going to be about preventing the pressures and the peculiarities of the step family home from holding people back from serving their Lord. You know, I have professed many times that obviously Satan hasn't read the entire Bible, because he doesn't know how it's going to end for him in the book of Revelation, and so he is still trying to destroy the believers out there. And satanic influence and Satan's influence over the Christian family today, there's no doubt about it. It is the strongest it's ever been. And I truly believe in what this line says, is that Satan's best line of attack is against the home and the Christian family. Once again, we all work with families that are honoring Christ in every aspect of their lives, but then when it comes to the challenges they have in their marriage, sometimes we just cannot believe what we hear or see. And we know that these are families that are under attack, and that we know that Satan is out to destroy the Christian family. But of course, we have read the whole scriptures and we know how it's going to end. So what are some suggestions that we can use to implement healthy step family ministries in our church? Well, first, we have to be the conduit for the communication of the messages of hope and determination. The wilderness, as it says, wanderings can be long and frightening, but there's the promised land of marital fulfillment, interpersonal connectedness, child well-being, and spiritual redemption. So all the challenges that we've shared in the past sessions, they're going to be there, but we have to be that voice of hope and determination when these couples and these families come to us and are seeking a way to do step families in a way that will honor God and Christ and honor the church. Once again, we're not lowering our expectations regarding God's plan for marriage, but we do not have any control over what families have already gone through and the road they've already traveled. We just can help them navigate the road going forward. So we are still going to be there to remind them not to give up, not to divorce, but to endure their journey until they reach the promised land. So that's the impact that we have in developing strong, effective step-family ministries. And anything that we can bring into the church to sustain the step families is just going to be that much more power to the step families. We want to maintain that, you know, and I've mentioned it several times, we want to maintain an outreach or evangelistic mentality. I would be the first to tell you that if I could just go off the proportion or percentage of families that I work with, which is a good number of families, I think in one of my earlier sessions, but if not, just real quickly, I thought when I got into counseling and pastoral counseling, I was going to be doing grief work because that's really where my heart was, and I wanted to help those dealing with grief. My practice has turned 98% into relationship counseling, and of that 98%, probably 60% is step families that are being challenged today. And as I said, there is not a strong outreach ministry or mentality, even in our area of the country, on serving the step families. And if they found a place that would serve the step families in that ministry, they would be flocking there in droves. You know, we said you may only have a few step families in your congregation, but you have a lot surrounding it. So once again, any step family ministry that opened its doors to the community, this would be an amazing thing, and I think you would be amazed as to the number of lives that you would be impacting, the number of lives that would be walking through the doors that want to participate in this. There are many things that are shared with me from couples that are second, third marriages and the challenges they have with children. One reason this has become so effective, or I wanted to get involved with it, is because, again, it's that supply and demand out there. And like I said, I was hoping to supply one form of counseling, but the demand was for this counseling of step families. And then when I would learn that there was really not much out even in our community to help the step families, this is why I so much encourage churches to look at these type of ministries for blended families, step families. And again, the vision that we as pastors have, we have to extend that to our leadership and our staff. And we're just saying, consider the step family ministry as an outreach effort. You're going to have people that will come into your doors that do not know Christ or have a relationship with Christ. And a lot of times these are going to be driven by what they've experienced in the past because of the challenges they have had. But now that we will give them opportunities to see what it truly is, what does a biblical marriage look like, can still be experienced and taught even to those that have gone through divorce and separation. And so I would suggest that we design our classes, titles, meeting times, with the unchurched in mind. I know that this audience that's listening to this today has a much better concept of what this would look like than I would, because, again, my approach to it is not from a church leadership perspective per se. Even though I've been there, it's in a private practice counseling for churches in the upstate South Carolina. But the idea is we want to have the unchurched in mind so we can have this outreach opportunity. So what are some things we can do? Well, first, start a support group or a Bible class for step families. And yes, there is material out there that can be brought into the church specifically designed for step families, and we want to make sure, again, put the paradigm of divorce or the vision of divorce, and let's change that paradigm a little bit and make it where these groups are going to be well promoted and well advertised, and that it's not going to be one of these things that you have to have on a Saturday morning at 6 a.m., but you know, it's going to be a typical Wednesday night class or a Sunday morning class. Now, this is while very few Christian resources exist, more are becoming available, and that's what I'm saying. There is material out there that is designed specifically. Smart Step Families is one place I would refer you over to, but again, at the end of this presentation is my contact information, and if anyone would like some additional information on where to find some of this material, I'd be happy through private messaging to do that for you. Recruit a well-adjusted step-family couple and a non-step-family ministry couple to lead the discussion groups. You know, the first one, we always will listen to someone when we know that they've walked in the same footsteps that we walked. So when we find that well-adjusted step-family couple in the congregation, and bring them into and ask them to lead these discussion groups, they have an air of authenticity about it, that, yeah, we know what it is. We've been there, we've done it, and we can relate. And again, equip them with the materials and support them however we can. Now, the Step Family Association of America can help establish local chapters and offer resources, support step families in your community. And once again, if anyone has an interest in contact information or you know, Google is always there, but if you'd like some additional guidance in what the material looks like or how to use it, just let me know, and I'd be more than happy to work with you on that. So what happens when you get a step family that visits your congregation? And this is really interesting. I really never gave much thought to it till about a year or so ago when I started doing some research in this area. I used to be a greeter at a church, and what we're talking about is educate your welcome team not to ask too many questions about their last names, why their last names are different. And, you know, asking them to explain may make them feel like an inquisition and may lead to more guilt and shame. And I do remember specifically being a greeter at a church and introducing myself, and sometimes you'd either get them to acknowledge who they were, or you would have the parents say, "Hi, I'm Bill and Sally Jones, and this is Mary Foster, John Jones, Sally Foster." And like I said, I think inquisitive, we just are, as human beings, inquisitive, and one, you know, first thing to ask is, oh, well, you know, are these friends or whatever. But the point being here is knowing that we're going to have step families come into the congregation, and if we do hear something that doesn't quite make sense, and have our welcome team understand that may not, you know, want them to start asking questions, just to kind of think about it before they go into it. If you have a discussion group, let them know about it, but don't require they attend. Now, the opposite side of that whole scenario is just that. If the team that welcomes people into your church are put on notice that while you're not going to be asking too many questions, but if you hear something that gives you a hint, this may be a step family, and then you as the leaders in the church can decide how you want to connect them with the ministries you have. Because once again, it says many will find it a comfort to connect with other step families, and then others will not want to be pigeonholed. So the idea is let the greeting team kind of know what's available and maybe how to direct them to a possible step family ministry you have, but in a way that will allow the family to make the decision if they want to participate or not. And so we're just asking for anybody, really, this is applicable to anybody who walks into our churches, but step families specifically, is, you know, it's okay for them to hide their past if they need to initially. Let them come in and be who they are, and they will start sharing their stories when they're ready to share it. And if they have the proper venues and forums to share it, they will especially start sharing it. Okay. Now, some other things that, you know, again, in the traditional paradigm of church, you get married, you have children, you raise your children, they grow up successful, you retire, you stay married for 40, 50, 60 years, you have a family that honors God, and this is our hopes and our desires, but the reality is we're going to have different types of families enter our classrooms where we teach different studies. So here's an example. During Father's Day activities, give the children the option of making 2 cards for their dad and stepdad if the child wants to. But see how different that is thinking already, and then how do we do that? So of course we have to know who these children are, and if they have dads, and it's an option they'll have. But a lot of times these children, especially with stepdads, are usually, and I want to be careful about that, but no, it's a true statement, are usually under the majority of the time are with their stepmothers, which means that they're spending the majority of their time with their stepdads. So what we're saying is you bring the step family ministry into the church, we want to help our church staff, leadership, teachers understand that there's going to be some things that we want to be sensitive to regarding the complexity, and especially if they find out they have children in their classes that are in a step-family relationship. Now, from the pulpit on Father's Day, this again, we want to acknowledge stepfathers and encourage their roles and sympathize with their struggles. This is not putting any less emphasis or importance on the concept of marriage. In fact, as we just discussed, if anything, this is our opportunity to use the pulpit to make this family and make this marriage stronger, and to make this family and this marriage the one that's truly going to be the one to glorify God and to honor God and Christ in what they do. And so we can use the pulpit as our opportunity to encourage and sympathize with stepfathers. Now, a lot of churches are already doing a great job with this. In fact, where we're going right now, I brought my 6-year-old granddaughter with me this Sunday, and my wife and I, and it's the first time she came to this church with us. And by the time we got her checked in, my biggest fear is that you got to give them all this identification. You then get a name tag for her. You get a name tag for you. You get a name tag that you have to hand them to pick your child up again. And all during the sermon, I was more worried about what happens if I lose the name tag to pick her up. Do they just keep her or what? But I mean, I'm kind of making jest of this, but in today's world, it is so important that we as a church know, are we doing the right thing with the children that are given to us for care during the time that they're on our property? And so, like I said, I know in this case I'm probably am preaching to the choir, because I've seen a lot of churches do great jobs in this, that they know who is authorized to pick the kids up after Bible class, who is not, and how do you get them. Like I said, I don't know what I would have done if I lost my piece of paper to pick her up, because I really got the feeling they were serious about that. So the custodial parents should put this in writing for the teachers, and like I said, many churches nowadays are going to even a much more sophisticated process where they know where these kids are all the time in the church. Now, what about our youth ministers? We need to help them be sensitive as well. Once again, if you've gone through, if you're a young individual, gone through seminary, gone through Bible college, I'm going to guess that today that's still one of the challenges we have, that there's not a lot of information that's shared about ministering to step families. I know when I went through seminary, I had nothing regarding how to minister to step families. And youth ministers today, they're seeing the impact of it, but are they being trained correctly? If not, let's help them get on the right understanding of this. So these are just some real down-to-earth ideas, but you know, if there's ever a time that they need to have medical releases signed, they have to be signed by the biological parents. Step parents generally do not have the legal right to provide consent for medical treatment. When traveling with the youth, the chaperone should know to carry the phone to both sets of parents. And again, we're talking about the biological parents in case of emergency. Class curriculum should include case studies that deal with common adolescent struggles on, you know, how to honor the step parents in view of Ephesians 6:1-3. How do we handle conflict with our step siblings? And what about when we're, you know, uninvolved with our biological parents? And teens need to take, you know, need a place to talk about such matters with youth leaders. Once again, as I throw in my personal experience in this, I am working with 3 adolescents right now who are dealing with behavioral problems. They're 11, 13, and 16. Not from the same family, just 3 different clients. And I can assure you that in working with these kids the time I have, that one of the root causes of their behavioral problems is stemming from, they all come from step families. They all come from step families where the biological parents, one of the biological parents, even after years of divorce, is still in conflict with the other biological parent, where they are remaining in, so the child remains in conflict, and they just feel unloved, they feel unaccepted, they still take upon them a lot of the guilt that's not their guilt to take. And my challenge is not with these children. My challenge is getting the parents. Now we're talking about the biological parents who should be co-parenting to understand. And so what happens is I get them, and at least I give them an opportunity to process and talk about it. And you know what? They don't need to be coming to therapists. They can go to their youth leaders and talk about these things if the youth leaders have enough training to understand what these experiences are, because the youth leaders probably, now again I'm going to be kind of general, but probably are not from broken homes, but that does not mean that they're not capable of understanding and at least trying to empathize with what it is for a teenager who is from a broken home and what they're struggling with. And so that's what we're talking about. They should develop some kind of counseling skill to help the custodial parents when their child leaves to live with other parents. And this does happen during the teen years, and it does bring a lot of grief. It's, once again, I have dealt many occasions where a child will live with a custodial parent till about 13, 14, 15, and I know here in South Carolina where I'm at, usually around 13, a judge will start listening to a teenager and will let teenagers make decisions regarding their custodial parent starting around 13 and 14. And, you know, you can just imagine what it would be like to have that child living with you for 13 or 14 years, and then one day they come up and say, you know, I'm going to go live with Dad, or I'm going to go live with Mom, and if you don't let me, Dad says or Mom says they're going to take me back to court, and the judge will say I can. And so our staff can develop some of these skill sets in just helping our parents. And of course, whenever we do marriage and family enrichment classes and sermons, let's don't forget about bringing in some ideas for step parents and remarriages. I know it's common that when we go to these or even present them or attend them, or when our congregation attends or goes to them, and I'm talking both inside the church and outside the church, it's not uncommon for the step family or remarriages to be completely left out of the discussion process. But once again, we're talking 43, 46, 47% of the population out there. So we have a demographic that has a demand for this type of information, and we can incorporate it in there. And once again, if you're a pastor that the congregation knows is receptive to and sensitive to the challenges and issues that go along with step families, that word gets out in the community also. And that's a positive word that goes out there. Several of my families make decisions as to where they're going to attend church because of what they've heard about how the pastor shares his or her views on what step families are looking like, and how the ministers and of whatever denomination we have out there. So we want to speak to their needs whenever possible. And also examine common biblical texts addressing family life to see how they apply and don't apply to step family situations. And we had that, I think, in the second or third session. We talked a little bit about that as to what the Bible does say and how many step families were there in biblical times. Even if you remember, we even brought the idea that technically by the definition, Jesus was a stepchild. So, because he was not the biological son of Joseph. Now, where you guys who have gone through this series are already ahead of pastors and ministry leaders that have not been exposed to this, you already have those pre-remarital counseling skill sets or been exposed to them and hopefully are doing some more research on them, where you are helping educate your couples about step-family dynamics. Remember, we talk about the dynamics to include with dealing with losses to children and adults, the realistic and unrealistic expectations. You can go back and review those. You know, remember we talked about how to cook a step family and how bonding takes place. It's more like a slow cooker. So many times our step families want to have this new perfect world created instantaneously. They don't understand when the children are having difficulty in adjusting to the new step family, step parent, step sibling. You know, we in our minds, when we create a step family, we just want, this is our new utopia, that this is going to be perfect, and then we start seeing that it's not as perfect as we thought it was going to be. And we talked about that in some past sessions about how the expectations of new mom and new dad are going to be much different than the expectations of the children or the expectations of the original spouse or the biological spouse or the biological parent of the child. So we want to understand how bonding does take place. We want to help the couple relationship after remarriage. Once again, if you remember, we talked about how the couples go into the relationship sometimes with expectations that are not realistic or without understanding the true challenges that they're going to face, and then they go into that and wham, they're hit with sometimes some of the same issues they had in the first marriage, but now they have all these new issues to deal with in the step families. And so we see why second marriages have a higher divorce rate than first marriages. What their roles, we can help them in their parenting and step-parenting roles, and what we call the X-Files, and that's EX, F-I-L-E-S. And how do we help them co-parent the issues after the divorce? There's going to be loyalty issues with the children. There's going to be establishing new traditions and new rituals. And some of the sessions, if you remember, might include, and this just kind of bring us back to that, where we have the step family adults and children together to discuss the expectations, roles, authority, and how children refer to their step parents. If The ex-spouse is willing to bring the ex-spouse into a session to negotiate co-parenting responsibilities. And once again, this is not going to be your typical premarital counseling sessions where you can get it done in just a few sessions. Sometimes we need to schedule 6 and 12-month follow-up sessions to gauge the progress and coach them through difficulties. And we also have to engage them for a longer period of time in the premarital side of it, because not only are we talking about the needs and what it is to be married, and once again, we did share a little bit that they've gone through marriage, and so we could possibly bypass some of the information we'd give to brand new premaritals, but on the other hand, there's so many other issues that have come into it that we want to make sure we have enough time to work with them. So what do? We host a step-family seminar. We sponsor a step-family retreat, or we offer a short course for step-family adults, but we do something within the church to minister to the step-families. When we go into counseling with them, we want to build a therapeutic alliance with both partners. We want to give information, good information that's related to their presenting problem. So this requires a good understanding of step-family dynamics and family systems. Now, once again, just as a quick example of what do I mean by this is the counseling of couples with stepchildren is different than the counseling of biological parents with children. What I mean by that is sometimes, you know, we have our pyramid of where our priorities come in life, and of course we have God, then we have our spouse, then we have our children as far as priorities go. But now in step families, it may not be uncommon to suggest to a biological parent that maybe you have to be given a little bit more time to this biological child of yours, where we would never say that in a family of origin, that we would want that child to grow up understanding healthy boundaries and where their boundaries are within that family dynamic. So there are going to be times that the counseling techniques and skills that you use and have been trained to use with biological parents is going to be completely opposite when we bring the step-family dynamics into the picture. If you lack adequate trainee counseling, of course, you can find a marriage family therapist, pastoral counselor. In South Carolina, they're called LPCs, licensed professional counselors. We have, as in my case, a board-certified pastoral counselor. We do have LMFTs, licensed marriage family therapists. The main thing is you want to find someone that honors the scriptures and the biblical aspect of the relationship. And, you know, I think we probably all have had our one or two nightmares with referrals going out there, because again, I've heard stories of, and I'm not putting this, and again, I'm clarifying this. This is why we have therapists from all different aspects and venues and trainings. There are some that want a more secular clinical approach. I'm in private practice because I work with a clientele that wants the theological and clinical approach to it, and you want to make sure that you're working with a therapist who is on the same theological stance that you are, because there can be nothing more complicated than to be working with a couple from your life view or perspective, send them out to a secular therapist or a therapist that talks about the Bible not being adequate in counseling, or you need to read this material and find out the material is, again, from a secular perspective, and they come back to the pastor and says, whoa, I'm really confused now. Not only do they say there's nothing wrong with this, but they also think we should be doing this, and you just feel your heart just drop when you say, oh, I cannot believe I didn't have enough knowledge of that therapist before I made that referral. So we have our job to do, and that is to find resources that are going to be healthy resources for our families. And as a segue into that, if you need additional information or help in setting up your church's step-family ministry, once again, here's my contact information. I'll make myself as available as I can to you and be happy to process or bounce ideas regarding this. But it is, as I conclude this today in this series, this is a ministry that is much needed, not very well served at this time, but once it is brought into the churches, implemented, and carried forward, it makes a huge impact on the existing church congregation, and those that come into the church. And once again, we know as a human body, as a physical body, if something is hurting in one part of us, I had a horrific, and I'm trying to, not poor Rick, but Sunday I get migraines sometimes, and I had a horrific headache on Sunday, and it was one of those headaches that you just can't do anything. Well, sometimes our church body gets paralyzed like this. We have a portion of that body that is just that headache to the church body itself. And what I mean by that is a pain, or it is something that's just not right. And we know that when the body is functioning in a healthy, holistic way, we do things much better. But when we have something that is not working right, when we have a pain, so if we can look at one aspect of our church ministry and our congregation and say, here's a place we can do some healing and holistic work, and then that just makes the whole body of Christ that much more powerful and that much more capable of going forward. So once again, I appreciate the opportunity to present this information to you, and look forward to hearing from those who have reviewed this information, and anything I can do to assist going forward, feel free to let me know. Thank you, Marshall.
Rick, thank you so much. This has been tremendous, all 4 sessions right on spot, and I appreciate your heart and, of course, your head, your education and your experience as a counselor. And so I trust you'll take to heart the things that he has given. Also, if you have questions, you can simply pause and go down and fill in a comment or a question, and Rick will get back to you with an answer to that. Of course, you can always reach him here with his contact information by email or by phone to get individual help. Thank you again, Rick, and we look forward to another session that you might do in the future on another area of counseling.